So Andrew, you were actually one of the first analysts to chronicle the rise of retail media. What has made it kind of pop in the marketplace in the past year or so?
Well, I think it began with everybody gaining awareness of Amazon's gargantuan ads business that was driving so much profitability for Amazon, but also seeing it start to filter to the next tier of retail media networks like Walmart. Walmart started to talk about Walmart Connect and how that was driving bottom line profitability. And all of a sudden, there was a realization that a lot of retailers were building, businesses that were hundreds of millions of dollars, or maybe even as much as $1 billion a year in revenue, but it's high margin revenue, so it really becomes transformative to the bottom line. That realization, I think, woke up the industry, and what's exciting, I think, is that it's just getting started. We are still very much in the early innings of it, and it's not just going to be Amazon dominated in the future. Everyone else gets to play a part in this, and even, if they can get 1-2% of this fast-growing market that's going to be a $100 billion market within the next few years, that's a lot of money.
That's interesting that you say it's not just going to be Amazon, because I think a lot of people assume that it will be because they own so much of the data. You said that sort of its early stages, but it does seem like the retail media evolution is evolving itself. Where do you see sort of the key areas of evolution in this space over the coming months?
Yeah, well, the early money was really on-site, and maybe more specifically on-site search. And there's a sense that on-site search for retail media is starting to get more saturated. Here's the thing, it's not. There's actually tons of opportunity and tons of runway in search. And in fact, if you look into the future, more than 50% of the new money that's going to come into retail media over the next 4 years is search. So let's not forget about search. That's how powerful that piece is. Lots more there. But then we're getting into these new areas that are really exciting, beginning with offsite media. And offsite is open web, social, and then streaming TV. And all of these are at an inflection point right now. So that's accelerating, and it's becoming a much bigger piece of the market. About 15% of retail media spend now. It's going to be upwards of 20% over the next few years. And then we haven't even gotten into the next exciting area, which is in-store media. I call that the next major media channel. It has scale, it has relevance, brand safety, all the things that TV has traditionally provided in stores. That's going to take a little bit longer to materialize, so it's actually only about 1% of all of retail media, but you can easily see how that becomes a $10, $20, $30 billion industry over the next several years.
Okay, so you mentioned in-store, you mentioned streaming. Can you dive a little bit into that connection between retail media and streaming?
Yeah, so we're in the digital era of TV, CTV, it's connected. And so what that means is that we can actually take the underpinnings of digital advertising, which is targeting audiences and then closing the loop to sales. So if you're a retail media network, you can take your advertising apparatus and plug that into streaming TV inventory. And that is really powerful when TV advertisers, TV's always been the least measurable medium, now all of a sudden you have measurement behind it. I think it's going to completely transform the way that consumer packaged goods advertisers look at the opportunity. It's going to bring new dollars, it's going to bring new advertisers into the space. It used to only be that TV advertisers were the big brands who could spend $1 million budgets. You're going to get more targeted campaigns that can bring in the mid-tier and even long-tail advertisers into the ecosystem. So this is where a lot of the growth is going to come from as we look ahead. So yeah, just bringing closed-loop measurement to TV-like advertising, in some respects, that's the holy grail of advertising.
Interesting. So almost like retail media is an on-ramp for small and medium advertisers into the TV space.
100%, because they don't have to make as big of a buy. They can have a targeted buy that reaches their specific audience. Creative is another piece of that, right? It used to be more costly to produce creative. I think especially with Gen AI capabilities, there's going to be some type of creative that can get created more easily that can run in these environments. I've already started seeing it. I was watching a show on Freevee on Amazon, and I started getting these targeted ads for, it was a dental chew for dogs. And it was actually a small brand that we had bought in the past. We weren't good about buying it regularly, and I was getting ads for this. And I thought, this isn't an advertiser that I would typically see on TV, but they're clearly buying into it. And guess what? The ads worked, because they reached the right consumer at a time where I probably needed that little prompt to buy that product again.
So tons of growth, tons of opportunities for advertisers, But there are some challenges, one of which is kind of in the areas of measurement. Then the other challenge is also in terms of the construction of a bunch of different walled gardens. We've heard from brands and agencies that, one of the challenges with the growth of retail media is kind of having to work with each of these walled gardens. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, well, there are only so many true walled gardens that they can work with. Let's just say Amazon is a walled garden in that sense. Really, it's going to become more of a hedged garden strategy, which is that you have to buy oftentimes through the retail media network themselves, but they need to open up into other platforms for buying as well. So a great example of this is Walmart Connect. They're obviously a huge player, but they're partnered with the trade desk, and their ad buys can happen through the trade desk. It is hard for a brand to manage buys through so many different walled gardens, so sometimes they need those other access points where they're already buying. I think that's the nature of the game now, is going to be, for certain advertisers who are deeply invested with a specific retailer, it's going to make sense to go directly through the retailer. Other times they're going to need to access that data from the retailer through different access points.
Maybe my last question is around measurement. There have been concerns about, just about the way that the different retail media networks measure things. There's different ways to measure outcomes. There's different ways to measure audiences. How are you seeing that play out over the coming 12 to 18 months?
I think that there needs to be standardization, but my guiding principle is really just transparency, and that each retail media network should provide multiple metrics. Don't just provide a return on ad spend metric and don't say what the attribution window is. Some advertisers, it makes sense to do a 14-day attribution window. Sometimes it's 28 days. Be able to have everything accessible so that the brand can use what's going to be most relevant to them. I also think there needs to be more standardization around incremental return on ad spend. So really understanding the incremental sales that are driven and not just the sales that happen post-exposure. If you're a retail media network, it's in your interest to basically have the longest attribution window so that you have the highest likelihood of being able to take credit for that ad impression driving a sale, even if the ad didn't necessarily truly drive it in a causal sense. So all these things need to happen. I just think that every retail media network should provide both return on ad spend and incremental return on ad spend, and provide transparency around the attribution windows. If everybody's providing those same things, then it becomes up to the brand to make decisions on what's the right metric to use in a particular instance.
So since you've been covering this for such a long time in our industry, is there anything that you're really excited about or looking forward to or just kind of expecting to happen before the closeout of this year?
Well, I think this year, I said 2024 is the year of offsite retail media for all the reasons we just mentioned, and in-store. I think the market for offsite retail media is materializing in a significant way. The dollars are going there now, and streaming TV in particular is supposed to jump, according to eMarketer, from 0.8 billion to 3.6 billion, in large part because Amazon Prime Video is opening up all that inventory. In-store, this is the year we're going to see screens rolling out in-store, so it's going to become more visible and pervasive. The ad market will still take a few more years to materialize in a more substantive way, but it's the beginning of a mega trend as I see it.